Well, we got an update on Congress's latest spending bill that they wanted to ram through, which apparently had a bunch of climate nonsense packed into it. And you have all these corporate Dems coming out, like Adam Schiff, who I believe is like a total military-industrial complex shill. There's some big defense contractor that's in his district. I can't remember who at the moment, but anyway, he's like, "Oh my gosh, we were so close to solving the climate crisis, but now we're all going to be underwater. The sea levels are going to be rising above our heads because we didn't pass this latest spending bill." Dems are really so arrogant, and the Greens, of course, in other countries, are so arrogant. They think they can control the sea level through legislation. Think of how absurd that is. First of all, these people, even if they had absolute power, they would still only have absolute power over 320 million people when there's like 7 billion people on the planet. Second of all, the things that they're trying to stop are not making the sea levels rise. At least not to the extent that they're saying that they will rise. Florida's not going to be underwater in 5 years. If sea levels rise a little bit, the only people affected, I assure you, will be the uber wealthy who donate to Democrats. That's probably why they're so concerned about this. If we have an inch of sea level rise, well, a bunch of beach houses are going to be underwater, and they'll have to build them on stilts. Boo-hoo, this happens when you live on the edge of an ocean. And you stay there for a long enough time because, believe it or not, coastlines shift. Beaches erode, they get eroded in some spots, and sand gets deposited in other spots. And throwing another $1 trillion or two at the problem, and by the problem, by throwing money at the problem, they of course mean just throwing money at welfare, at various special interest groups, NGOs, propaganda pieces in the media. They aren't accomplishing a goddamn thing except paying off their donors. And of course, seizing more power for themselves and the administrative state. They apparently wanted to, quote, punish harmful methane producers, which sounds like a euphemism for trying to outlaw cattle ranching in the way that they're doing in the Netherlands. Now, maybe this particular bill didn't get there yet, but if they set the precedent that, oh, well, we need to punish people who emit methane, well, that's cow farts. So it's a pretty short jump from there to start punishing cattle ranchers. And who's going to be able to pay for all the regulatory costs, associated with cattle ranching? Is it going to be the small independents, or is it going to be Bill Gates and the other big corporate ranchers? I mean, this crap is so transparent. I'm almost tired of talking about it at this point. It's like getting to the point to where I was with talking about the 2020 election, in the couple of months before and after that election. Of course, we're not allowed to talk about it on YouTube anyway, and if I ever developed any kind of a real following on this platform, I assure you, YouTube would go back and just flag my videos talking about the 2020 election, because there's too many of them for me to go. I'm just too lazy to go back and take them down. I'd have to go back and delete pretty much everything from whenever they instituted that policy and told us to stop talking about the election back like 6 months, because I talked about the election, way before. At least I believe, before the 2020 election itself. I was talking about problems associated with it. But I don't want to get off on a tangent about that topic, especially when I might say something that could be used to my detriment. So who's responsible for killing this latest spending bill, which would have only accomplished exacerbating inflation by printing more money, because that's what the federal government does when they spend money, when they introduce new bills, because they run at massive deficits every year anyway, so it's guaranteed that a large portion of all the money that they spend has to be printed. Not to mention all of the increase in the cost of living that would be associated with any sort of so-called climate initiatives. which all that ever is code for just trying to make things that are inexpensive more expensive. Try to make energy more expensive, try to make food more expensive, to drive as many people into poverty as possible, increase the suicide rate, decrease population growth and overall population at some point, so that the Malthusian fetishists like Senior Gates can, get their kicks. Put it that way. Well, the great hero of the day, the man of the hour, turns out yet again to be West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin here. Because old West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin comes from from what I believe it to be, the #1 coal-producing state in America. He apparently himself has founded some coal companies that his family still owns. At least that's according to some other Democrats that don't like him. Which to me, that makes me like Joe Manchin a little bit. I don't think he's great. I mean, West Virginia could do worlds better. But nevertheless, he is that 50th Democrat vote, and if they don't got him, they got nothing. And that's just the way it's going to be. And he's looking at 9.1% inflation. He's saying, you know what, is it really a good idea for us to be printing more money? And the Dems, of course, are saying, oh my gosh, with all this inflation going on, I mean, we got to just get on this stuff right now. With all this, we got to really double down on going green, because of that war in Ukraine, as if that makes any sense. And so West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin makes a very reasonable case that why would we try and do a bunch of stuff that's going to increase the cost of living, that's going to put more money out into circulation, bid up the costs and the prices of consumer goods when we got 9.1% inflation? Shouldn't we as Congress be doing something to try to, if anything, reduce inflation, to borrow a phrase from President Joe Biden, who said that spending more money actually will, it doesn't increase inflation, it will reduce inflation. Reduce inflation. Reduce inflation. I think he said it 3 times. But not a lot of people bought that, including West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. And so, I mean, really, this guy, him and Sinema, to a lesser extent, are standing between America and the brink. Now, America's going down the tubes anyway, but it would be worse, more catastrophic perhaps, if not for West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. Alas, despite his valiant efforts, it will not be enough to abate this inflation. Congress needs to cut their deficit down to 0 if they want to stop being part of the problem when it comes to inflation. But of course, we can't do that because the United States would collapse. The U.S. cannot operate only on the tax revenue that comes in. That's just not the way our government is set up. The way our government is set up to run annual deficits every year from now until the end of America. And the rest of the world is just supposed to, buy our treasury bonds, and so far they have. Now, could Manchin still flip? Could they do something to buy him off, to get him on board? Sure. I mean, he's not a man of principle by any means. He's 100% a greedy little politician, just like the rest of them. Especially once the recession is acknowledged to have begun in earnest. Most people on the ground realize that the recession is on now, but the conventional wisdom is that you don't have inflation and recession at the same time, even though we learned in the 70s that's not true. They are not going to be at all interested in limiting spending once it is official that we're in a recession, even if inflation is high. Now, I hope that West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin will prove me wrong on that. I hope he will stand his ground, but I think it'll be very hard for him to deny massive spending bills once it's official, once we've gone 2 quarters in a row with an official negative GDP plan. And speaking of which, I don't remember when Q2 GDP is officially published, so we'll have to wait on that, but it is certainly going to be negative. And the Dems have until January 2022 2023, my gosh, before they lose this, 50-50 split in the Senate that they have right now, in which Kamala Harris can break ties. So as we get into the recession, they'll probably have some more latitude to massage Manchin's position. Although who knows? Maybe he will stick to his guns on inflation and say, hey, we need to get inflation down first. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.